By the late 90s and early 2000s, a new era of rock and roll bands started popping up. You had nu metal acts like Korn and Limp Bizkit, and then post-grunge acts like Puddle of Mudd, Nickelback, and Staind. Puddle of Mudd would have a meteoric rise soon after being discovered by Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst. Their debut album would be a massive seller, moving millions of copies worldwide. But the band's time at the top would be short-lived due to infighting, addiction, and personal problems that plagued their later years. Not just that, but the band, rather than being loved by their hometown, would have some turning against the group and treating them like pariahs. Today, let's look at whatever happened to Puddle of Mudd. Formed in September of 1991 in Kansas City, Puddle of Mudd's original lineup consisted of frontman and rhythm guitarist Wes Scantlin, guitarist Jimmy Allen, bassist Sean Salmon, and drummer Kenny Burkett. The origin of the band's name came from the group's rehearsal space. The band used to rehearse next to the Missouri River levee under the Broadway Bridge. And every year the river would cause flooding, and while the band rehearsed on the second floor of the building, they had to walk through the first floor, which was always a mess. The band soon developed a strong following in and around their hometown, and in 1994 released their first EP, Stuck, through V&R Records. Ahead of the band releasing their demo Abrasive in 1997, guitarist Jimmy Allen would leave the group, and the band would limp along before infighting resulted in the band imploding a few years later. It was at this point that Scantlin soon turned his attention to moving to New Orleans with the goal of managing his then-girlfriend, who was a stripper. But it would be a friend of Scantlin who dragged him to see the Family Values tour in Kansas City in October of 1999, and headlining that year was Limp Bizkit. Scantlin was able to get a fake pass, schmooze his way backstage, and had a demo tape to Fred Durst, a security guard. Nearly 3 weeks later, Durst would call Scantlin and send A&R man Danny Wimmer to Kansas City to see the band in person. Scantlin would tell KCAL 96.7, "Fortunately, Fred Durst and Danny Wimmer went to a pawn shop and purchased a ghetto blaster just to play the demo tape. They were cruising down the road, they say, and we're like, wow, this is so cool." So that's how that happened. But Scantlin had one problem. Puddle of Mudd as a band didn't exist anymore, and the demo that Durst had listened to was just Scantlin and drummer Kenny Burkett. Ahead of Wimmer's visit to Kansas City, the duo needed to enlist 2 musicians to play a showcase for the A&R rep. Things didn't go well though at the showcase, and Wimmer wasn't impressed, and it appeared that Puddle of Mudd was over for good. But things didn't go down that way. Burkett would recall how after the audition, Wimmer took both himself and Scantlin to Olive Garden, and he would tell the pitch Kansas City, "We agreed to meet at the studio the next day at noon, but they never showed up. Apparently they put Wes on a plane to Los Angeles. I spent 8 years of my life helping Wes reach his dreams. All he had to do was be man enough to stand up and say, 'There's one guy that has to come with me,' but he couldn't do that." According to the same article, it was Burkett's drug problem that made him a liability to the label, something he pushed back against in the same article, stating, "It was nothing I wasn't willing to give up and nothing I haven't given up since," he'd say. Once Scantlin arrived in LA, he'd be given a hotel to crash at, but that was it. He had no car or living allowance, and all he had was the clothes he had brought and his guitar. So in order to survive, he had to bum $100 a week off his mother. It was during his downtime from being in the studio that Scantlin wrote a bulk of the band's debut record, Come Clean, and went jogging to keep himself in shape. One of the songs that Scantlin wrote during his time in LA would be the track Blurry, which told the story of his life in the city, telling American songwriter. Blurry was basically about being flown to freaking Los Angeles, and I didn't have any friends, so they put me into a hotel room. I didn't know anybody at all, and I was just missing my family and son. I missed my grandma and stuff. The same sessions would produce several other singles, including She Hates Me, Control, and Drift and Die. Scantlin would claim to have written the music and lyrics for Control in just 10 minutes. The lyrics on the band's major label debut would target ex-girlfriends, himself, and authority figures, with Scantlin telling Rolling Stone magazine, "I've been through a lot of crazy relationships." It was during the time that the first record was being made that Fred Durst used his connections to help assemble a new lineup of the band, including drummer Greg Upchurch, who had previously played with Soundgarden frontman Chris Cornell, touring as part of his solo band, while the rest of the band's lineup would be rounded out by bassist Doug Ardito and guitarist Paul Phillips. Scantlin would tell Rolling Stone in 2001 about his new bandmates, saying, "They're my new best friends." Durst, for his part, would end up directing the band's videos for both Blurry and Control, and the video for Control would see Scantlin playing a musician who is set to perform at a dive bar. As his girlfriend drives him to the venue, the couple get into a fight and she kicks him out of the car, leaving him to walk on the side of the highway with his guitar in hand. Showing up late to the gig and angering the venue owner and his bandmates, Scantlin would save the day with a great live performance, and he would tell MTV. The funny thing about it is when I was going over the story for the video with Fred, I went, dude, this actually happened to me. I wasn't going to a gig, but I got kicked out of my girlfriend's car and had to walk. Then again, I think everybody's been kicked out of their girlfriend's car at least once. She was a wild one. She would do crazy things that would hurt me. There was no way I could control her, but at the same time, the intimate part of our relationship was totally off the hook. I was kind of blind to the whole situation I was in because the sex was so great. Then one day I woke up and just said, man, I can't do this anymore, and you're not the one for me, so I gotta go, bye-bye. The video for Control would bear a striking resemblance to a 2002 domestic violence arrest involving the frontman and his fiancée when the pair were driving to a video shoot. According to witnesses, they reported seeing a man forcing a woman into a Jeep Cherokee driven by a third person, and sheriff deputies and the California Highway Patrol officers stopped the Jeep and arrested the couple. The arrest, though, wouldn't affect the band's touring plans, but it would be one of many arrests for Scantlin. Come Clean would have several more big singles, including She Hates Me and Drift and Die, both of which went to #1 on the rock charts. The album would go on to sell over 5 million copies, and Blurry would be one of the biggest rock songs of 2002. In fact, in my homeland of Canada, it was the most played rock song on radio that year. By the summer of 2002, the band was already teasing what their next album would sound like, with Upchurch telling the Orlando Sentinel, "We've been working on new material and sound checks, basically recording them through the mixing board and getting pre-production done. It sounds like it's coming along. I want to say it's heavier, but not in the sense that most people are going to think. It'll be a lot more like Drift and Die or Basement or Out of My Head," he'd say. As the band readied to release their second album, Life on Display, in 2003, it was done with little fanfare. While the album's first single would be a #1 hit on the rock charts, giving the band their 4th consecutive #1 hit, the album didn't even sell a fifth of its predecessor. It was during the same year that Creed would break up, and a lot of the hate reserved for the band seemed to fall on Puddle of Mudd. This likely had to do with the group's association with Fred Durst, who didn't get much love from the press either, or the fact that the band worked with the same producer who did all of Creed's albums up until that point. But the negative reaction to the band from critics and from some music fans did little to upset Scantlin, who told the Chicago Tribune, "I've been doing this for a long time, and there was always going to be a lot of negative things said about you, no matter who you are." Even back in Scantlin's hometown, people seemed to treat him more like a poser or a pariah than a hometown hero. Dave Johnson, who played with a local band named Everybody's Ex, would tell the Pitch KC, "Nobody around here ever saw Wes wear a hat. Then he disappeared for a year and went to Fred Durst Rock School, where you wear a hat and look mean." While a local writer named Jeannie Moore would tell the Pitch KC about the band's debut record, it seemed as overproduced as anything by Britney or Christina. I can admit that they're good songs, that they've got really catchy hooks and really catchy lyrics, but to me, I don't feel like anything he says is heartfelt. Even Scantlin's ex-bandmates in the first iteration of Puddle of Mudd weren't happy with his success, hitting the frontman with litigation, with original guitarist Jimmy Allen getting songwriting credits on the first album. As for the band's career being helped by Fred Durst, Scantlin seemed to have a strained relationship with Limp Bizkit's frontman, telling Canada's Chart magazine in 2004, "He doesn't write our songs, he doesn't produce our songs, he doesn't do anything for us. He doesn't do our videos anymore, he doesn't do anything for this band. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what the guy's like. All I know is that he's like Mr. Hollywood guy, Mr. Celebrity. Like, I don't hang out with anybody except Hollywood celebrities. Every single effing interview I've ever done, I get asked about that effing guy. We have nothing in common. He doesn't even call us. Has his assistant call us to congratulate us on our record. Yeah, that's how pathetic he is," he'd say. In 2004, while on tour in Toledo, Ohio, fans at a Puddle of Mudd show got a lot less than they bargained for when frontman Wes Scantlin cut the band's set short after only 4 songs, announcing he was too wasted to play, and eventually found himself in police custody, facing a disorderly conduct charge for spitting at the cops and public intoxication charge. It was during the promotion cycle for Life on Display that drummer Greg Upchurch also left the band and joined Three Doors Down. There would be a 4-year gap between the band's second and third release as the group dealt with lineup changes. In 2007, Puddle of Mudd would return with their third album, Famous, which produced 2 top 5 hits on the rock charts in America with Psycho and the title track, but the album only sold around 400,000 copies. Puddle of Mudd would follow that up with 2009's Volume 4, Songs in the Key of Love and Hate, which commercially underperformed, barely moving 100,000 units. The band would enter a pretty difficult period over the next decade as Scantlin's substance abuse issues and behavior spiraled out of control really until 2017, and his rap sheet is almost way too long to go through. In December of 2011, the IRS came after the frontman, claiming that he owed about $60,000 in back taxes. The following year in April, he'd be arrested for cocaine possession and driving under the influence in Culver City, California, and he could have faced a 5-year jail term back then, but agreed to enter rehab. Then in September of 2012, he'd be arrested again on a flight from Boston to LA for public intoxication and disorderly conduct. The list goes on in the subsequent years up until 2017, including a domestic abuse charge against his ex-wife, destroying the property of his neighbors, in addition to resisting arrest. All while Scantlin's personal life was in turmoil, Puddle of Mudd would assemble a new lineup, really the third incarnation of the band, and their shows soon became unpredictable. In 2015, Scantlin was accused of lip-syncing at a performance in Ohio, which resulted in the band deleting their Facebook page after the gig. Things would come to a head in Dallas, where Scantlin threatened members of the audience, threw bottles of water and the microphone into the crowd. Then in 2016, during a performance in England, Scantlin's bandmates left him by himself on stage, as the frontman appeared to be under the influence. All while this turmoil was going on and the band was undergoing lineup changes, they were also trying to record new music. But things finally seemed to turn around by 2018, as the band would announce that Scantlin had entered rehab for about half a year. Puddle of Mudd would hit the road in 2018, and things appeared to be going a lot smoother for the band, with them releasing their latest album in 2019 with Welcome to Galvania. Loudwire named it one of the best 50 albums of the year, and Scantlin would credit God and a judge for saving his life at the time. However, in 2019, the band did get some bad press when they covered the Nirvana song About a Girl during a performance in SiriusXM Studios. You can check out the performance on YouTube. Just last year, Come Clean would turn 20, and the band would go out on tour to celebrate the album's anniversary. There were 2 events that happened last year where Scantlin stopped the band's live shows mid-performance, with the most recent event happening in November of 2021 in Green Bay, Wisconsin, when the band would end a performance midway through their set after Scantlin complained about the stage lights being too bright. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like button and subscribe. We'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.